mean, I thought it was pretty interesting because it kind of changed the way I thought Malcolm X, like who he was. Because I always like, oh, you got Martin Luther King, the peaceful one, and you got Malcolm X, the one who was, promoting violence. But I mean, he really changed my view of that, kind of showing that he's not for that, not racist. He's just trying to speak their language.
Yeah, and like, it's a very powerful and emotional speech because he's coming from like just like drastic events because like his house was bombed and that's like kind of like shakes you, but he just like stayed firm in what he believed in.
Yeah, so he didn't think he didn't second guess himself like, should I be doing this? He's like, time to go harder then.
Yeah.
I think one of the reasons that he was like very much like, he comes out starting talking about his family and how he like has to be this like great husband figure and great father figure. So I think that's one of the reasons why it was so like emotional and passionate. Because he's like, he has like not the burden, but he has the weight of like kind of like the civil rights movement on him, but also that he has to be this father and he has to be this great leader, and I think that's one of the motivations that he has, and that's what I really got out of it, which I didn't really know growing up when I learned about Malcolm X as well.
Yeah, it was really like eye-opening for me to like listen to him like speak from his like perspective, because in school you just hear about MLK, and then they label Malcolm X as an extremist and like don't listen to what he's saying, like this isn't what we should be promoting. But listening to him like bring in his family, his religious background, promoting peace and just trying to defend his own perspective, it was really refreshing to see that.
Yeah, I like really respected that he like was able like to stick to like his guns pretty much like throughout like all that he's going through and like the criticism that he was getting. Although me personally, like I did like disagree with some of the things he said, like when he was saying like, oh, like certain people, like if they like want to use violence, like you have to learn to speak their language and like use violence against them so that they can like understand you, right? He used like the language analogy, and I thought like that it's like not always like true, I guess, but
I mean, I guess that's why we talk about Martin Luther King more than he's kind of got through that language barrier better than the violence.
Yeah, I guess especially like now, like after we see like I guess like the impact that like Malcolm X had and the impact that like MLK had, like how the difference in their approaches like made a difference in like the kind of impact they had. I guess like for us, like hindsight's like 2020, it's easier to see that like I don't know. I guess it's easier to criticize him now.
Yeah, I would definitely say that it provided a lot more context to like just him as a person, because it was like my first time actually hearing like his words, so I didn't really have like a lot of background information on him. But I think just like hearing the story of like how his house was firebombed, it just kind of helped me understand his perspective a little bit better and just seeing like where he was coming from. And like he was saying, like I also didn't kind of agree with that whole like you got to respond with like this language, but it definitely did like open up my mind to like where he was coming from.
I feel like his message about violence was also, I think it was something that I found challenging, just responding with violence. But if you think about, I feel like the context has helped a lot, because it was a time for extreme violence for minorities, and one of the issues was that the law enforcement wasn't doing anything, and sometimes they were even perpetuating the violence. So in that context, you can see how just responding non-violently and peacefully can sometimes cause more people to be harmed. And an interesting comment someone made about just the violence versus non-violent messages of like Malcolm X versus MLK was that if you look at a lot of the civil rights legislature that passed around like the 60s and the 70s, around the time that he was alive, you notice that there was often an act of violence before it. So there were like riots that broke out before it got passed, or like the rise of like some violent groups like the Black Panthers. And so you can see how that violence actually might have helped not that I personally promote violence. I'm just saying how, and he says it more as self-defense. And if you look at it, like American history, we're not like, oh, someone has attacked us, the U.S., now we have to respond with love and nonviolence. That was kind of something unique to the civil rights movement, and that's something that like was only pressed on for and pushed for really minorities.
I mean, like I personally think like there's room for both. Like I think that's why one of the reasons the civil rights movement was so impactful was because you had both sides. You had Martin Luther King and peaceful, and like they attacked us love, but you also have when it gets down to it, we gotta do. So Malcolm X, I think what he's promoting is definitely part of. I mean, it's needed. I think in sometimes.
I agree with that. I think that's why MLK was needed for the South,
Yeah.
and Malcolm X was needed for the North.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, his beliefs were a lot more radical, and it was interesting to see it and like read about all of his things because he'd only changed his views like 5 years before he had died, after he went on and had a religious experience, and that made him change his beliefs. And it's interesting to me because I grew up with like a Muslim background, and it's always promoting peace and stuff, and there are like certain instances in history when people have been attacked and they just are patient and they wait for things to change, but they don't really change. And so it's like he had a different point of view on it that was different from what Islam says in like traditional text, but his interpretation of it was just different.
And I think he brings up interpretations in a lot of senses, right? Like how you interpret violence with self-defense, but also like the idea of like preconceived notions. Like during the speech, he mentions like the whole like airplane situation where I thought that was a really cool story or antidote that he puts in there, and how he was like, people have these preconceived notions of me, and I feel like I always have to defend myself in front of people before I can even get my message out. And I think that's one of the reasons why in history we kind of think Malcolm X is this like notorious kind of like violence promoting thing. It's because he always has to defend himself, and people see that first instead of what his true message was.
Like the people they were talking about on the plane you were sitting next to, the first thing he has to explain is that that's not me, I'm not promoting violence, I'm not racist. So yeah, it definitely gets in the way of his
and then
motives.
You get so caught up with like the violence part of it, you're not actually like understanding. He's not saying like take up arms, he's gonna like defend yourself on top of that. And so our next speech is The War Agitators by Charles Lindbergh. So just comment on like what you thought, how the historical context played into that.
I mean, I thought it was interesting as I was looking at some of the background. It's like when I listened to it, I was like, okay, that sounds logical. I can see why people would agree with him and stuff. But then like afterwards, he was painted as complete Nazi sympathizer or anti-Semite, so it was a huge backfire. So I just didn't expect personally that America would take it so poorly, because I kind of agree with them at times. Like you should, or at least I think we should focus on American interests first. But then obviously nobody really took it that way. He kind of got ostracized for that. So I thought it was interesting the way it played out, not that I really expected it.
I had no idea who he was at first. I think that's one of the reasons I didn't pick him necessarily in my top 3. And so when I did have to do research about it, I thought it was really insightful looking like the beginning of his life. Like his dad was like a congressman who was super like anti-war during World War I. So I thought it was really interesting that he took that position. So yeah.
I mean, leading up to his speech, the decade before that, most of America was really anti-war, since they just got out of World War I, and really nothing good came out of that, and it like ultimately led to World War II. So a lot of people were pro-isolationist, but like the build up to all of the events, like, and eventually Pearl Harbor, it didn't really like shift in like Charles Lindbergh's favor when he like delivered that speech. Like the few months before, they were in talks with Japan, and like that's when like the tide started to shift, like more support for like providing resources to our allies started to come in from the public, and eventually like the moment that he delivered it, I feel like it was like almost too late for him to say anything, and poor timing on his part, because before that he did like seem to like people painted him as a Nazi sympathizer for like showing like admiration for German military efforts and everything. So I don't think his timing on his speech just backfired on him.
Yeah. Because like I think like all the points that he brings up are like pretty valid, or like they're like understandable. It's like it's like kind of like, why would you like impart all these like troubles upon yourself if like you're just like being pressured by outside forces too. I think just like the context in which he like delivered it. I think like because he like even like mentions them too, like like people who speak out against the war are really will be painted as like anti-Semitic and like all that. And so he almost like I guess he like says it himself. He like knows it's gonna happen too, but I don't know, just like everything like coming together like and when he's saying the speech, it just like makes it even worse for him.
I don't know, it's pretty bad too. But like he kept on going on how catastrophic the war would be, but after the war, like the U.S. like their economy ended up booming after that. So it's just how like what he said in that speech, it didn't really favor him after the war or like going into the war.
I think it's interesting because it's a very different historical perspective than the one we get. We don't really talk about the people who are strongly anti-war or hear their opinion much. But I don't know if I personally agree with him. Some points such as when he talks about, he says it's mainly the British and the Jewish that are trying to get us into the war. But there were a lot of like Jewish Americans and British Americans, and he's almost discrediting that as not a true American voice. And if you look at a lot of the politicians, I mean, they just had a lot of economic and political ties to Britain, and that was their choice to want to get in the war. And I think in the end, we did get in the war after they bombed Pearl Harbor, and it was really American interests that got us into the war in the end, and I kind of supported it afterwards. But I think it's kind of in the same way as Malcolm X. He did get attacked by the press a lot, and history did kind of paint him poorly, and that wasn't entirely fair for him.
I don't agree with one of his points that he made when he was talking about the Jewish and how they just need to build tolerance and stuff.
Oh yeah.
And that when he was saying that they should oppose the war because they would be the first ones that it would backfire. But bad things are already happening to them. So it's like they had to fight back at that point. And it's kind of like the Malcolm X, they spoke the language of violence, so they responded in violence.
Like, well, I think like American interests are important. Like, I mean, at the same time, he's basically saying like, all those Jews over there, you're in America, you're an American Jew, just be happy with that, don't worry about it, which is, I think it's kind of messed up just to leave all the oppressed Jews in Europe kind of just left with no American help. So.
Yeah, he treated America like an isolated country, not like a country that existed with other people.
Yeah, I think like especially like now after like World War II's over, like we know like it's like thanks to American involvement that like things like went the way they did, but like it's so hard to imagine a world where like if like America didn't get involved, like where would we be now, right? Like I don't know, like Hitler would have won, and then like yeah.
Honestly, our involvement in other countries now, like would we still be in all these other countries across the world, like with our military, would we be there if we hadn't got involved in the war? I mean, you can take it like as the involvement of America in all these other countries as bad or good, but like I'm just wondering, like, would we still have our military stance or like presence in these countries if we didn't get involved?
Would we be a superpower, right? That's the big question.
I think it's really like World War II, like where like you like because of World War II, then you got like Soviet Union and like U.S. exactly as the big superpowers, but then like none of that would have happened.
It's kind of like a butterfly effect.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's usually how I agree. Like, I feel like if American can help, because it does have like a lot of the like army power and everything, like if they can, I feel like they should. But I think in the speech he did bring up a lot of good reasons as like other countries' intentions for wanting America to join the war, and I feel like that's something like we sometimes don't take the time to think about. So I like him adding that in and really just like opened up my mind.
For me,
There you go.
for me, I had no problem with his first two when he was talking about like the British people and the Jewish. I can kind of understand. For me, I saw more of a problem when he was talking about like the Roosevelt administration and how like the third term, because it was like the first time a president ever had a third term, because like Roosevelt's agenda was solely to get into the war. That's when I was kind of like questioning a little bit, because I'm sure when you're going for a third term in the situation it was, your intention isn't to put your country in harm's way as the president. And so that was the part of the speech that was kind of difficult for me to understand, and I had to like rewatching it to kind of see his point of view.
Okay. I kind of want to switch it to the last third of his speech, which focused on free speech, where people were fired and backlashed for just being anti-war during that time. It's kind of relatable to right now, where people have like unique opinions about stuff, and they get backlashed about it.
So like in today's political climate.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, he was talking about like on a university, it should be a free speech thing, and then people are getting kicked out because of promoting like anti-war and that kind of thing. So
Yeah.
For sure, there's a lot of social ostracization happening if you have a minority view, for sure.
I think it occurs in times of war a lot where like the government or just the public tries to censor people to like get our best interests out there, but I don't like everyone is putting America first when they put their own opinion out there. It's just their approach is different, and that applies to now too. I think it's unfair for people to silence others just because it doesn't fit with whatever the majority is saying, because in the end their intentions are the same. It's just that everyone has a different approach of like tackling these situations, and it's like extremely unfair to like ostracize a group for like putting out their own opinion at that time because it's unpopular. Because like during the Vietnam War, everyone was protesting against it, and then like everyone's anti-war, everyone wants everyone out of there. But then in World War II, everyone's like, why are you anti-war? Why won't you interfere with like what's going on in Europe? It's just very hypocritical to like ostracize whatever people say just because it's different from yours.
I think there's like a almost like mob mentalities ago when you see like, or like bandwagon effect, like you see all these people, right, and then like they like, it's like they pull together like such like a large group. It's like makes it so hard to like oppose them. And honestly, I thought like some of like Lindbergh's points about like how the Roosevelt administration contributed to that, kind of like promoting that like the oppression of like people with like anti-war views. I thought you were pointing like about how like it's common, like history is like pretty interesting because like I guess it is like, especially like American, like a lot of American like wars like or like conflicts, like even like going back to like I don't even remember what it's called, like the Sedition Act or whatever, like John Adams like tried to silence people who like opposed like the war and like his administration, like a conflict in like his administration because of it.